Jannara Nana Yamunatira Vanacha Yamunatira Vanacha Jayata Madhav Punjabi Radha Punjabi Gopi Janavala Girivara Dham Gopi Janavala Girivara Dham Yasharanandana Bhajananandana Yasharanandana Bhajananandana Yamunatira Vanacha Yamunatira Vanacha Jairata Madhava Punjabiha Jairata Madhava Punjabiha Jairata Madhava Radha Krishna Jairata Samurara Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Prabhupada 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 Jai Shri Prabhupada Jai Ashita Shri Srimad Swami Stacy Bhaktivedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pariraj Ki Jai Ashto Tavashara Shri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Anand Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Jai Gaur Premanand. So I see here Jiva Pandit Prabhu says that he can't hear me. Is that a problem for anyone else? Otherwise I'll keep speaking. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th Canto, Chapter number 10, Maharaj Rahugana meets Jadabharat. Text number 16. Kas tvam nikudashchadastvijnam Ibhashi shutram katamo vaduta kasyasi kudratya ihapi kashma kshemaya nashchit asimanta shuklaha. Katvam, who are you? Try to speak a little bit louder so that you can hear me. Katvam, who are you? Niguda, very much covered. Charasi, you move within this world. Dvijanam, among the brahmanas or saintly persons. Viparshi, you also wear. Sutram, the sacred thread belonging to the first class brahmanas. Katama, which, Avaduta, highly elevated person. Kasya asi, who are you? Whose disciple or son are you? Kutraya, from where? Iha api, here in this place. Kashmat, for what purpose? Kshemaya, solve the problem. Here in this place, Kashmat, for what purpose? She Maya, for the benefit, Na, of us. Chit, if. Asi, you are. Na Uta, or not. Shukla, the personality of the pure mode of goodness, Kapila Dev. Translation and purport by His divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. King Rahugana said, O Brahmana, you appear to be moving in this world very much covered and unknown to others. Who are you? Are you a learned Brahmana and saintly person? I see that you are wearing a sacred thread. Are you one of those exalted, liberated saints, such as Dattatreya, and highly advanced, learned scholars? May I ask whose disciple you are? Where do you live? Why have you come to this place? Is your mission in coming here to do good for us? Please let me know who you are. Purport. Maharaj Rahugana was very anxious to receive further enlightenment in Vedic knowledge because he could understand that Jada Bharat belonged to a Brahmana family either by disciplic succession or by birth in a Brahmana dynasty. As stated in the Vedas, Tadvigatam Sagurum Iva Bigachit. Rahugana was accepting Jada Bharat as a guru, but a guru must prove his position not only by wearing a sacred thread, but by advancing knowledge in spiritual life. It is also significant that Rahugana asked Jada Bharat which family he belonged to. There are two types of families, one according to dynasty and the other according to disciplic succession. In either way, one can be enlightened. The word Shukla refers to a person who is in the mode of goodness. If one wants to receive spiritual knowledge, he must approach a bona fide Brahmana guru, either in the disciplic succession or in the family of learned Brahmanas. Om Jnanatimidandasya Kananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. King Rahugana, O Brahmana, you appear living in this world very much covered and unknown to persons. Who are you? Are you a learned Brahmana and saintly person? I see that you are wearing a sacred thread. Are you one of those exalted, liberated saints such as Dattatreya and other highly advanced learned scholars? May I ask whose disciple you are? Where do you live? Why have you come to this place? Is your mission in coming here to do good for us? Please let me know who you are. So welcome everybody to Bhagavatam class this morning. Continuing again with the conversation between Maharaj Rahugana and Jada Bharat. So Maharaj Rahugana has just responded to Jada Bharat after hearing from him for the first time. And you can see that his mood has drastically changed because he's understood that he's not dealing with some ordinary person, but he's dealing with someone who's not only a Brahmana, but is, because as we know, someone can wear the thread. You can go to India and spend a couple of rupees and get yourself a thread, but it doesn't mean that you have the Gyan and the Vigyan, the knowledge and the realized knowledge. So King Rahugana is seeing not only by he's all of a sudden seems to have noticed his Brahman thread, but also more than that, he's understood that the way that Jadabharata is speaking is indicating that he's a very elevated personality, and his consciousness is very elevated. Um, so this was the advantage of Vedic culture, that people in general were aware that there was such a class of people who had not just gyan, not just knowledge, but actually realized knowledge. And not just about any old thing, because what's the value of having knowledge about any old thing? Of course, it is valuable if it's connected to the supreme thing, to the supreme person. Uh, then that knowledge can become valuable. But without having knowledge of the supreme person, then all other knowledge is more or less useless. So in Vedic culture, then people understood there was actually a class of persons who had real knowledge about the supreme absolute truth, about supreme person. So that was the benefit of that age, whereas now we don't see that. We don't see that people recognize that there's a class of persons that they can approach to get real knowledge about the supreme absolute truth. So this is the advantage of a real human civilization, a Vedic culture, that if people desire, they can actually approach someone to learn what is the real loka tattva, the truth of this world. But the reality is that even in Vedic culture, even in previous yugas, not everyone wants to know what is the loka tattva, what is the truth of this world. We come to this world for the purpose of uh, being in ignorance. Last night we were doing some reading just with a couple of the Prabhus in the ashram. We were upstairs hearing about Lord Shiva. Nitai Chand Prabhu was reading some um, place in Brihad Bhagavatam reader, and there it's describing about the glories of Lord Shiva. And there's one explanation given about how Lord Shiva, uh, one way of understanding him is actually to understand that he's an incarnation of Krishna, that he comes here for a particular purpose, and he's not actually Jiva Tattva. He's not an ordinary living entity. We were discussing this a little bit last night because it's a little bit contradictory to what we hear about considering the names of demigods to be equal to Supreme Person, to Krishna, um, which in general is true, but we were discussing last night about how Lord Shiva, he's in his own category, and in a sense, he is actually an avatar of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I've heard it explained before that often, and if you ever, of course it's not recommended, but if one was to read the Shiva Purana, then it's mentioned that actually he is the Supreme Personality. Um, and I've heard it explained before that this explanation is given in the Shiva Purana to give persons who are predominated by ignorance a chance to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his form as Lord Shiva and make advancement from where they are. So another example that's given is that actually this world is predominated by ignorance. So therefore, in a sense, Lord Shiva becomes the Lord of this world because he is the avatar of Tamaguna. He's just like Lord Brahma looks after passion, Vishnu looks after goodness, or in other words, Vishnu maintains, Brahma creates, and Lord Shiva, he is in charge of the mode of ignorance or destruction. So in that sense, he's the Lord of uh, the living entities in this world, because the point that I'm trying to make is that we come to this world for the purpose of being in ignorance. So we're here because we don't really want to know the truth. We don't really want to understand what is the purpose of life. So it's not just in this yuga, but even in previous yugas, although people are extremely pious, still there's a tendency towards wanting to avoid the reality that we're not the controller and that we're not the enjoyer, and that's actually Krishna's position. So we see this in many examples in Bhagavatam, great persons who, yeah, in one sense they're great. They have extreme piety to attain a certain position, whether it be Indra or Brahma or anyone below them. Still, there's this kind of tendency towards ignorance of reality. Uh, One classic example that's given is Nala Kuvera and Manigriva. They were sons of great demigod, treasure of the demigods, Kuvera. And we hear how the greatest Brahmana, the greatest saintly person, the greatest brahmachari, pretty much the spiritual master of everyone in the Bhagavatam, Narada Muni appears. He's spiritual master of Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, so many great personalities. Um, you'd think that you would have some respect for him, but because of their inclination towards enjoyment in this world and their attachment for enjoyment, they just couldn't care less. They were happy drinking, intoxication, fooling around, goofing off, as it said, and they had no inclination towards offering him any respect. So if you don't offer someone in an elevated position respect, basically what you're saying is, I don't care for you. You got some knowledge, but I couldn't care less. I'm happy here. I have my intoxication. I have my woman. And what more do I need? I don't need your knowledge. So this is their situation. And Prabhupada, in this part of Krishna book, you'll read how he gives this example that um, actually Narada Muni, he wanted to curse these boys so that they became rectified, their mentality became rectified. So he was thinking um, to put them in a particular situation where they would become rectified from this situation that caused this offense. So Prabhupada gives the example of um, how if a rich man becomes a poor man, or sorry, a poor man becomes a rich man, then he can understand the struggles of a poor man because he's been in that situation. And Prabhupada talks about how a poor man is very fortunate because if a saintly person comes to his house, then he will eagerly invite them in and eagerly serve them, even if it's just by giving them a glass of water and a place to sit. So in this way, he gets the blessings of a saintly person. Whereas a rich man will, I don't know what this, actually, maybe it's different here. I guess it's probably, I know it's definitely like this. I've seen in movies, if you go somewhere like Beverly Hills or something in Hollywood, then there's no way that anyone can approach your house. It doesn't matter if you're Narada Muni or however well off you may be or respected you may be. Then they have so many gates and things, you can't just approach someone's house. Um, so the general tendency, or the example from this point is that the more we have in this world, the more we think, I don't need any help from anyone or anything. So even in Vedic culture, even in previous yugas, we see that persons who have power generally they don't really think that they need anything. They don't think that they need help. In other words, they're falsely proud. Uh, so many pastimes we could give, famous ones, of course, of Indra and Brahma, even these great persons, become bewildered, um, thinking themselves to be more superior than Krishna himself. Uh, so, having said that, then um, it reminds us of this uh, prayer by Queen Kunti, Janmaishvarya Shuta Shribir Edamanam Madapulman Naivar Hatya Vidatum Vai Twam Akinchana Kocharam. So Queen Kunti, she also confirms this in her famous prayers that Prabhupada, it said that Prabhupada quoted. I've heard it said that Prabhupada quoted uh, the most from Queen Kunti and from Prahlad Maharaj. So in this way, he's showing that anyone can become a devotee, whether you're a woman or whether you're a young boy or a man, whoever. Um, so this famous prayer, a lot of devotees will know and have heard that uh, Janma, Aishvarya, Shruta Shribir. So Janma, good birth, Aishvarya, material opulence, Shruta, beauty, and Shribir, learning. Sorry, Shruta is learning, and Shri is beauty. So these four things, Queen Kunti says, they're actually all sources of mada or madness. Eda mana mada puman. And Nayavar Hatyavitatum vai. They actually block one from surrendering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Um, it's a type of madness because we think, yeah, I'm so beautiful, I'm so smart, I've got such a good birth, such good parents, and I've got so many material opulences. Why do I need to listen to you? Uh, but really, our situation in Kali Yuga is that no one has a good birth practically. Maybe there's a few Gurukulis. So maybe 0.001% of the population may have gotten this rare birth of taking somehow or other the good fortune of taking birth in a devotee family. But for the rest of us, then we're pretty unfortunate in terms of our birth. Our opulences, what can we really claim to have? We dress ourselves with plastic jewelry, and we live in these crazy cities, uh, these tiny little cold houses uh, where our family is spread out and our relationships are broken. Our beauty in comparison to other yugas is not so flash, to say the least. And our knowledge, what do we really know? Uh, Nothing practically, unless someone is fortunate enough to come across knowledge given by Prabhupada. But other than that, our knowledge is all practically useless and pointless. Um, so really, we have nothing to be proud about, but somehow or other, because of our lack of knowledge in Kali Yuga, then we become proud of whatever so-called material opulence we have, whatever little bit of learning we have, whatever little bit of beauty, and whatever good birth we think we have. That, oh yeah, I was born in New Zealand. We're nuclear free. You know, so we can come up with all these concoctions about what we think is good, uh, in comparison to what we see around us. But Prabhupada gives the example of Mr. Frog in the well. He really has no idea how big the ocean is. He puffs himself up thinking, is it this big? Is it this big? So we look around the world and we think, yeah, actually, I'm doing pretty well. I'm not born in uh, some place where there's war going on, and I'm pretty, pretty handsome or pretty beautiful in comparison to other people. So we're always comparing in our mind according to what we see around us, thinking that we're quite superior. But when we read Bhagavatam, we hear about, the beauty of someone like Arjuna, or the beauty of someone like uh, Devahuti or Draupadi. Then we'll be thinking, wow, okay, maybe I'm not so beautiful after all. Or we hear about the learned scholars, so we think, okay, wow, I really don't know anything. And we hear about, the material opulence of places like Dwarka or something. So we become humbled and realize, actually, wow, I'm a Kinchana Gocharam. I've really got nothing. Um, so this is the advantage of hearing. If we're fortunate enough, then we'll realize that actually we've really got nothing in this world. That we're completely helpless, and we should depend upon getting mercy from the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His representative. So this is what Queen Kunti says is our qualification, that we feel ourselves that really I've got nothing actually. Uh, I've got no real qualification in this world. And this is how we're seeing a glimpse of this coming through now in King Rahugana, which goes to show that actually he's not really such an ordinary person. He's a special soul. Of course, he's in the Bhagavatam for one, and he's meeting Jada Bharat, and as we know, not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Supreme. So he's extremely fortunate, and he's taking advantage of that good fortune. He could have just heard Jada Bharat and thought, oh, I don't have to listen to this guy. I'm a king. Just get on with you. Just do your job, or I'll cut your head off. That's what Kshatriyas would do. If someone's misbehaving, someone's not acting properly, they'll just deal to them. So he could have just acted like that. But he was fortunate and pious enough to actually understand that, oh, this is actually someone who has knowledge. So I should actually listen to what he has to say. So it's very unfortunate because in Kali Yuga currently, that uh, opportunity is not being given enough to the people in general. People in general have a tendency to want to learn something, but our society has not expanded enough to provide everyone that opportunity to actually hear what is the absolute truth. In fact, yeah, you'll see that, okay, here's a person, Jada Bharat, you can see by his symptoms that he's a teacher, he's an educator, he has a thread, he's a brahmana, and he's speaking in such a way that you can understand this person has knowledge. So that used to be common in ancient times. Now, the same thing is there. We can go to an institution and we can see, when we go into the institution, that yes, this is a person of knowledge. Why? Because they have the words PhD or doctor added to their name, and they dress in a certain way. They sit at a particular place. They have their vyasasana that they sit on, and they instruct their students. And everyone goes in there. They, get their initiation. They give their dakshina. They give their money in the form of $50,000 loans or more, and they sign themselves up to hear from these persons for the purpose of gaining knowledge. And there's a great amount of faith that they invest in these people, thinking that they'll become happy by hearing this knowledge. So you can see the same tendency is there, but the problem is because it's Kali Yuga, then the people who are educating us are completely demoniac. Okay. Of course, it's a big generalization, but in general, it's true. And the exception will prove the rule. Pretty much everyone is more or less demoniac. And if you don't believe me, we can hear from Bhagavad Gita. Pravritim jana vritim ja janana vidhur asuram nashokcha napichacharo nasatyam teshu navidyate. So Krishna explains in the 16th chapter that those who are demoniac, they do not know what is to be done and what is not to be done. Neither cleanliness nor truthfulness is found in them. So we can see a world that's full of leaders and educators who have no idea what's to be done and what's not to be done. And even if they know what's to be done, they can't do it. Why? Because they're unclean. Not just physically, of course that's there, but internally they're unclean. Their hearts are dirty. So therefore they may know what to do, but they can't actually do it because their heart is filled with so much dirt that instead of doing the right thing, they're always doing the wrong thing. Why is that? Because they're pushed by the modes of nature. They can't actually overcome that influence. Because we're all pushed by the modes of nature, like Krishna explains. Um, how does that verse go? As Puryamanam achala pratishtam, Bhagavad Gita 270, where he explains that for a pure devotee, the desires that come into the mind, but they're not overwhelmed by those desires because of the purity of their heart. So, and the example is given of the ocean that's having water pouring into the ocean, but it never overflows. So, in the same way, a pure devotee, then they always have desires. Everyone is always having desires coming into their mind, desires to basically exploit material nature. But because of a pure devotee's devotion to Krishna, then they're not even agitated by these desires. Although they're there, they don't act upon them. So the more pure that we become, the more clean our heart becomes, then to that degree we can actually act in such a way which is beneficial for not only ourselves but for others. So people who are demoniac, even if they know what is to be done, which is unlikely, most people have no clue what is to be done, even if they're a great leader in society. But even if by somehow or other they do have some inclination of understanding of what should be done, still they can't do it because they don't have the spiritual strength to overcome the modes of material nature. As Krishna tells us, these modes, Daivahyesha Gunamaya, Mamamaya Dharatya, Mamaviya Prapadyante, they're impossible to overcome by our own strength, but only by surrender to Krishna. So a real educator of society, a real leader, a real teacher, they're surrendered to Krishna. They can overcome the modes of material nature. And therefore they can actually lead and teach people properly. So we don't have those kind of educators. Therefore they're demoniac. And what does Krishna say their philosophy is? Satyam apatishtam te jagad ahor anishvaram aparas paharasam bhutam kim anyat kama hoitukam. So they say that this world is unreal, it has no foundation, no God in control, and it is produced only out of sex desire, out of lust. So this is what everyone, practically every single person will learn when they go to school, that there's no purpose behind this world. It came from nothingness. There was an explosion. As Prabhupada says, a chunk exploded. And from this chunk theory, then, life miraculously began, even though we've never seen an explosion cause anything beneficial or anything good. Somehow or other, this explosion gave birth to life. Somehow or other, this matter that exploded, it produced consciousness, even though no one has ever seen matter produce consciousness. So that everyone is being educated in this crazy theory, and they're thinking that, oh yeah, I'm so intelligent, I paid $50,000 to learn about the chunk theory, and now I'm going to go out. And because I know the chunk theory is real, because I learned it from these other people who are expert in the chunk theory, then I'm going to live my life according to that. And so what is the result? Etam drishtim avashtabhya nashtat mano lupabuddhaya prabhavant yugra karma jayayo jagato hitaha. Krishna says that accepting such conclusions, so accepting the conclusion that life in this world is produced out of nothingness, if you accept that conclusion, then he says the demoniac who are lost to themselves, who have no intelligence, engage in horrible, unbeneficial works meant to destroy the world. So we see that today, that's basically what's happening. People are becoming educated by persons who don't know what's to be done, and then they're being told that life is meaningless, purposelessness, there's no purpose to life, and therefore the result is that they go out into the world and their activities are horrible and they're unbeneficial and they're causing the destruction of the world. So this is the unfortunate reality of Kali Yuga. For Prabhupada, he would say that this modern education is like a slaughterhouse where you go in. We used to actually, my full-time service as a brahmachari was cooking and distributing prasadam at the university in Auckland. And we would cook at the peak of it, we were distributing 600 plates of prasadam in a 2-hour period. So we had 5 brahmacharis just serving out, and then a 6th one taking the money so we could process people very quickly. So I would watch every day these students going in and out of the university. And I would try to picture that, yeah, this is just like a slaughterhouse. Like, you see the animals lining up and they go in and then they come out as just meat. There's nothing there anymore. So these kids, innocent kids, practically. Of course, no one's really fully innocent to be in Kali Yuga, but a lot of young persons, they go in and then they come out and they're completely just like lifeless meat. They've just got no brains anymore. They think that they become completely brainwashed with materialistic knowledge. Of course, that's not the case for devotees. If you have a material education, then actually there's one quote Prabhupada uh, said that someone, a college student, he told this to, who did he tell this to? He told this to, I was just hearing this in the glorification of Bhakti Tirtha Swami by Radhanath Maharaj. And Bhakti Tirtha Swami and his traveling partner at the time, I think Buddhi Manta, I may be getting that wrong, but his partner at the time, they had heard a quote from Prabhupada saying that actually, if you can get a college student, then it's like having 100 non-college students in terms of how much they can give to the society of Krishna consciousness. So I just wanted to, Mahabodhi, thank you, Jiva Pandit Prabhu. Was it Jiva Pandit? JP Prabhu, I'm not sure who that is, but thank you. So yeah, Mahabodhi and Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. So I just wanted to make that point that yes, if you have a education as a devotee, then of course that can go a long way. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about reality is that most people then it just makes them even more confused and more conditioned in terms of life. So this is the unfortunate situation that the reality is that our education system for people is right from the very beginning, and New Zealand is causing this demoniac mentality. In New Zealand, there's this big problem because the high schools, uh, they're being told by the government that they have to now introduce curriculum of course, they call it sex ed or sexual education, is there in high schools. But now, because there's so much confusion around gender, then they also have to include now in the curriculum um, education about basically sex life for homosexuals, transgenders, everything. It all has to be included so that everyone feels included and that there's no discrimination. So, of course, it's a very controversial topic for religious schools because, first of all, for us, for example, as Hare Krishnas, Prabhupada has given us the explanation that sex life is for the purpose of procreation. So, how can you teach sex life between homosexuals? But their school, the Hare Krishna school in Auckland, the only Hare Krishna school in New Zealand, they have to follow this guideline, otherwise they lose all their funding. And they basically become a private school, which means that anyone who wants to send their kid to the Hare Krishna school pays at least 10 times the amount. So they're struggling trying to figure out how to function and educate people about God in this demoniac world where uh, we're being forced to be educated how to be demoniac, basically. And that's the reality, that there is a demoniac force in this world and it's pushing very strongly. Before I came to Krishna consciousness, I had a good mother and father, and I was fortunate that my mother was quite, from a young age, she told me that I remember I was outside hitting a tree with a hammer, just smacking the bark off the tree, as a kid and she came up and she chastised me. And she told me that actually there's no difference between this tree and you, that this tree also is a living being, is a soul in the tree, just like there is in your body. So you shouldn't cause harm to this tree. And I remember that very clearly. That and so many other things she kind of told me. She had belief in reincarnation and things, and that sort of just was ingrained in me as a young kid. And then later on in life, when I was a teenager, we would watch these. There was a famous video that came out called Zeitgeist. That was kind of the first of the big conspiracy theories that was kind of made available to people. I remember it was printed on DVDs and distributed. So I watched that with my mother, and then she began watching things like this person, David Icke,
who now is extremely controversial, and even has always been controversial. But it was very interesting because this was maybe at least 15 years ago or something. But he was at that time explaining about how there's a demoniac force in this world and it's influencing us whether we know it or not. And in a very technical way, he'd done so much research about it, how that influence is there. So I had more or less become convinced from a young teenager that, yeah, there's more to this world than what we see, what we perceive, and there is some sort of evil influence in this world. And I was very convinced of that, and I used to be very frustrated because I would hear these people like David Icke talk about these things. And then at the end, they would say that, we're actually all spiritual energy, and we're actually all above this, evil energy that's trying to influence us. And I think, okay, that sounds great. But then then it would finish, DVD finished. And then you'd have to try and find what am I supposed to do? Okay, that's nice. I can see that there's some sort of demoniac influence in this world. But how am I supposed to overcome it? How am I supposed to transcend it? So for quite a while as a teenager, I was thinking about this, and I never thought that it would have anything to do with religion. But somehow or other, I met the devotees, and I came across. I had started reading Bhagavad Gita, but it was a struggle. And one devotee gave me Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj's book, Spiritual Warrior 1. And when I read that, I thought, if this is what the devotees know about, if this is what the devotees are into, then that's it. I'm becoming a devotee. Because he so nicely was explaining all of these things, how there's this demoniac influence in this world, but at the same time, there's this divine energy. So we're very fortunate because we can see not only that, yes, the way the world is going is demoniac, but we understand that actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead has a plan, and whoever would like to be
Hare Krishna. Sorry, apologies. The computer restarted that I was speaking on. So hopefully you can hear me okay on my cell phone. So I guess just to wrap up, there's a demonic influence in this material world, and we're fortunate as devotees that we have the opportunity to actually overcome this. Just trying to remember the train of thought. So actually, people, they're looking for Krishna consciousness. They're looking for this highest type of knowledge. So we have to somehow or other arrange a situation where people can come to Krishna consciousness and hear from devotees. And when I first started practicing, this devotee, Mahavan Prabhu, he told me that, when people look at the Hare Krishnas, they think, oh yeah, they're just those people who go on the street and they sing their song and they have nice vegetarian food and they're nice people. But he said one day people will look at the devotees and they'll say, oh, these are people who actually have knowledge. So we want to create a situation where people can feel comfortable coming into the association of devotees. And gradually they'll begin to understand, wow, these people actually have knowledge. Just like King Rahugana, by the Lord's arrangement, then he's come to a situation where he understands that actually this Brahmana, Jadabharat, he actually has real knowledge. He can actually help me in life. So this word, zeitgeist, I was mentioning that video that was put out maybe 15 years ago, that word zeitgeist, it means the kind of the mood of a particular time, or the kind of, the predominating mood of a particular time. So the zeitgeist of this time, of this day and age. Kids are quite frustrated. I was just in LA before coming to Gita Nagari, and Hari Bhakta Prabhu, one devotee there, he does a lot of outreach. He was telling me that like the holy grail for young people now is regenerative agriculture and no plastic, and because they're the ones, they understand, they're the ones that are going to have to deal with a destroyed climate later on. So Gita Nagari, I was just thinking, is such an amazing opportunity, that you actually have the opportunity to really appeal to the zeitgeist of this time, the mood and the mentality of young people. But it's just somehow rather attracting them here. And us as devotees becoming more expert in what we can offer here. And just attract people based on something external at first. But then gradually, as people come into the association of devotees and they hear from them, then they realize, wow, these people are actually, they actually know the truth of this world. So, anyway, some thoughts on this text and purport. Apologies for the technical difficulties with the computer. Maybe someone has some comments or questions or corrections, anything they want to add, please go for it.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Haribol Prabhu.
I want to thank you for a very nice class. And I greatly appreciate your points. You made a bunch of valuable and important points. I wanted to say that this purport, Srila Prabhupada refers to Mundaku Upanishad, famous verse, Tad Vigyanartam Sadgurum Eva Vigachet, that talks about the importance of the need to approach a spiritual master. And Srila Prabhupada quotes this many, many, many times. I mean, hundreds of times throughout his purports and lectures. And even in this chapter, I think he refers to it at least 3 times in this particular chapter. And so evidently he feels that the message is not redundant necessarily, but that there is a necessity for us to be reminded again and again of the importance of this understanding. Each day we sing Sri Guru Vandana before Srila Prabhupada. And this is actually a new introduction to our Sampradaya. Previously, Guru Puja was an annual function to this day in the Gaudiya Math. The devotees perform Guru Puja once a year. But Srila Prabhupada, after preaching for some time in the Western world, United States particularly, he saw that there was a widespread disease amongst people, that they, in addition to the tendency towards impersonalism and voidism, there is a mentality of independence and how do I say, you in your class you spoke about the tendency for people to feel as though they don't need anything out, particularly for someone who is maybe a little affluent. They don't really think that they need anything else. They already have everything that they need or want, and so they're less receptive to what another may have to offer. And that's the mentality that Srila Prabhupada observed in Westerners particularly, not so prevalent in, at least in India. People have a more firm understanding of the importance of the Acharya, our dependency upon the mercy and guidance of the Acharya. But in the West, Srila Prabhupada noted that even amongst his Western disciples, there is a disease that we always want to invent something new. And there is a reluctancy to submit to the authority of anyone. Actually, we are averse to authority in general, and we always want to create some new and novel approach. It was a tendency that Srila Prabhupada spoke about extensively, and he felt that he had to constantly battle this tendency in his disciples, that regardless of what was established, devotees would always want to create something new again. It's one of the important reasons that he established some strict rules about the office of presidency in our temples, that the way Srila Prabhupada set up the structure of ISKCON, it's extremely difficult to remove a temple president from his post by Srila Prabhupada's design. He did that because the tendency he saw amongst his disciples was to want to constantly change the leadership, and as soon as someone else assumes the position, then they want to change everything that was established previously, and there would tend to be no continuity. A plan would be created, infrastructure put in place, and then a new person comes along and rejects everything that was painstakingly established previously, and something new is begun. And again, this process would repeat itself, wasting time, energy, resources. So Srila Prabhupada wanted a continuity of service and establish systems and facilities, and to try to protect that, he made it extremely difficult to remove a temple president or to replace a temple president. He wanted instead that the devotees would somehow or other learn to work together. If there was a problem, to try to repair what is broken rather than replace it. That was his attitude about everything from typewriters to devotees themselves. You don't remove someone from their position. You help them to do better. Anyway, my point is that Srila Prabhupada stressed again and again, repeatedly in normal times, the importance of the spiritual master and surrender to the spiritual master, the importance of taking guidance from the spiritual master. So every day we sing that the lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain pure devotional service. It's that important. There is no other way. It's, it's so critical. And so he instituted this policy of daily Guru Puja to constantly remind us, because particularly in the West, we have a problem to understand this. We have this tendency to want to be independent. So we're short of time, but I wonder if you could say a few things about this business of accepting the guidance of the spiritual master.
Yeah, we have 1 or 2 minutes. So the first thing, I guess, that comes to mind is, one devotee, actually the same devotee told me about that one day people will recognize devotees as having knowledge. He said to me that generally it takes, that's when I first started practicing, he said generally it takes 10 years for devotees to get over themselves. So, or to even to begin to get over themselves. So it's just, like you're saying, that's just the mentality, that's the tendency. And I guess dealing with Western people, then what I've seen that works in New Zealand is you just have to basically become their friend, develop love and trust with them. And then gradually they begin to accept more and more your authority as a devotee. Even His Holiness Dave Maharaj, when he went to New Zealand, his mentality was like, whatever works, basically. So when he talks about when he got devotees to go out on Sankirtan, he just told them, just do whatever you like, but somehow or other just get out there, because he knew that as soon as you start telling Kiwis particularly what to do, then they'll just do the opposite, because they're very independently minded people. So I guess there's not just the Western world, but there's the different atmospheres within the Western world. They all have their particular mode. And so Prabhupada says that an acharya is one who can figure out how to inject Krishna consciousness into the dull minds or dull brains of the public. So, on one hand, it's really, and that was, like you're saying, that was Prabhupada's genius, that he realized Western people are so arrogant, so puffed up, really, that we need to hear these things daily, not yearly. Maybe in India that works, but no, we have to hear daily. Otherwise, our tendency is that we'll just forget and revert back to the way we think things should be done. So I guess we as practicing devotees are supposed to take advantage of hearing. And then on the other hand, it's the job of the acharya to create that system where it's easy to hear. Okay, that's the conch shell. Hopefully that does some justice to your question, Prabhu. Thank you very much. I'll have to log in the other computer for darshan, so just hopefully it's restarted. I can do that. So be patient, please, if you're waiting for the darshan. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Bol. Yeah, restarted. Do you mind?
Hari Puja, Om Hari Puja, Mahajani, Om Hari Puja, Mahajani. Ananda